Thank you very much, Dr. Dheeraj Pradhanang. Let me start sharing my screen and then I will talk after that. Okay, share. So is my screen visible to all of you?
Yes.
Am I audible clearly and also visible, right?
So very
Professor
nice.
Das.
Very good. So thank you very much once again, Dr. Dheeraj. Of course, I'm thankful to the Tribhuvan University, Kathmandu, Nepal, the ASEAN, for giving me opportunity to present this seminar before you. It is always a pleasure. In fact, as most of you know, that I graduated from Tribhuvan University, Kathmandu, way back in 1975. So it is always a pleasure and also sometimes very nostalgic whenever I visit there. The photograph which Dr. Dheeraj showed just a few minutes ago was the college where I studied my BSc, and that is the lobby where we as a student used to walk around, roam around. So it's always a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you so much. And also, of course, I'm privileged to present this talk before three former Director Generals of Meteorology of India, Nepal, and Bangladesh, Professor ABM Dr. Tyagi, Dr. Karmakar, as well as Dr. Madanlal Shrestha. So all good friends. So thank you so much. And of course, Deepak Aryal, thank you so much for this opportunity. So I have a little larger number of slides. So I just estimated that in the given time, 45 minutes, probably I will have to flash my slides 2 per minute. So please bear with me. I really hope to cover the comprehensive aspects of this challenges in forecasting the severe weather over the Himalayas. Well, this is the outline of my talk. I will start from the fundamentals because I understand that in this webinar, there may be many students also attending. So it will be good for them to talk from the fundamentals. And I will talk about how to resolve the Himalayas in the models, challenges in observations, challenges in modeling and prediction, and the future. So, well, this is the glimpse of the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. And as you know, the entire Hindu Kush Himalayan region is prone to many types of severe weather, including the cloud burst, the thunderstorms, the tornado. I mean, one of the historical tornado occurred in Nepal in 2019, 31st March 2019. Hailstorms, heavy rainfall, snowfall, causing avalanches and landslides induced by the heavy rains. Fog also forms very frequently in this region. Of course, heat and cold waves, and sometimes cyclones indirectly, because when its track is quite long, and then it sometimes also enters the Himalayan region, including Nepal and Bhutan. So these are some of the weather, severe weather that affects the Himalayan region. So the question is, what is severe? Okay. Now, severe is something like anomalous weather, right? It is a relative term, as you know, because something which may be severe for somebody may not be maybe normal for somebody else, right? Like so much of rainfall occurs in Cherrapunji in one day, and that is normal for them. But if the same amount of rainfall occurred somewhere in Rajasthan, then it becomes severe for Rajasthan. So it is a kind of a relative term, right? And it is anomalous. So despite existence of many global and regional models producing wide varieties of forecasts, the meteorological disasters continue taking its toll on human lives and economy. We did some work on the mountain weather forecasting many years ago, and those are reflected in these publications in 2003, which we published on the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society about the mesoscale modeling for mountain weather forecasting over the Himalayas. And similarly, we had organized a workshop on mesoscale modeling for the mountains, in which participants also from Nepal, DHM attended that conference. I remember it was way back in 2002, and the proceedings of all those things were published in the current science journal. So this is something that people are working for so many years, but still the challenges are there to predict the severe weather. Now, the first thing here in predicting the severe weather over the Himalayas is how to resolve the Himalayas in the model. Okay, because I'm talking in terms of the dynamical models, right? Well, this diagram shows the model topography at 90 kilometer resolution produced by this party. We had in fact done this way back in 2002 for that workshop. And you can see that even at this coarse resolution, how the topography over the entire Indian region looks like. Of course, we can see clearly the tall mountains in the north, but as you can see that they are kind of not very clearly resolved. If we go by pix by pix, then they are not really resolved very clearly, although broad scale they are resolved properly. We can also see these mountains, Khasi Hills over the Meghalaya region, and this tunnel, which causes so much of rainfall for the Cherrapunji region. You can also see the Western Ghat here. But actually, as a matter of fact, even this resolution, the mountains at this resolution is not sufficient if you really want to produce more accurate location-specific forecasts. Okay, so how the mountains are represented in the model? Basically, there are three ways we represent the mountains in the models. One is, of course, based upon the topographic data that we have globally available. One is the mean orography, which uses average terrain in a model grid box, but it trims the peaks of the mountains. Other is the envelope orography, and it's like a blanket over terrain that clings to plateau, but rises smoothly to cover all but sharpest peaks. Valleys are filled up and terrain is smooth. Now, if we use this technique for representing the orography. Third is the Silhouette orography. It averages only the tallest features in each grid box, thus lies below the hilltops and above the valleys. Okay, and what are the data that are available to represent topography in the numerical models? Generally, most of the people use USGS data, which are available at different resolutions at 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute, arcsecond, and 30-second arcsecond, which is approximately 1 kilometer. Nowadays, even higher resolution topography data is available globally, which is SRTM, and that is available even down to 10 meters. So the question is that depending upon our need, the resolution of the model, we can use various types of topography data that are available globally. This diagram illustrates the different ways of representing topography over the mountains. For example, the green curve here, the green curve is indicating the envelope topography. If you are using the envelope topography to represent the mountains in the models, then this is how it looks like. Okay, if you are using the Silhouette topography, then you can see that peaks are mixed up. Okay, even the valleys are filled up. And so also the mean topography, if you use this one, red curve, then also the boundaries are not clearly represented. So the models on which we trust so much, the numerical models nowadays have become the backbone for forecasting. If in the models, the topography are not represented accurately, then obviously we cannot expect very accurate forecasts from them. My slide is not moving. Okay. Somehow my top portion of the slide is covered by this. I don't know how to get rid of this.
Actually, if you click one more time, it will appear.
I click one more time.
Okay, it's coming. Yeah.
Well, the second line. This is the second line. The first line is missing. So covered by those tabs of the zoom tabs like mute, stop video, etc. But
you can drag that, I think. If you move your mouse a little bit down, then it will disappear.
If I'm able to hide, that will be better. I don't know how to hide it. Okay, I can move it like that.
Okay.
Right. Okay. But when again it stays back at the bottom. It doesn't go below this. So again, I will miss some part of the bottom. Anyway, so I'll move up and down depending upon the requirement. Okay, so representing orography. So there are two factors that limit the model orography. Now, one is the horizontal resolution of the model. When depending upon what resolution we are using in the model, accordingly the topography will be smooth. And normally when we say about, for example, the current global models, or even for that matter, the mesoscale models, and try to represent the mountains, or for example, the Himalayas. Now, Himalayas, as you know, all of you know, the Mount Everest is at 8 kilometers, roughly 8 kilometers, the peak of the Mount Everest, right? Height. But generally in the model, that 8 kilometers is not represented. It is highly smooth depending upon what resolution we are using and what kind of topography data we are using. And most likely, at times, the Mount Everest is smoothed down to 5 kilometers. And as you know, the normal height of the Tibetan plateau is 5 kilometers. So, in other words, we miss most of the time in the model grid box the real mountains. And to represent the real mountains as real as possible, again, we have to have very high resolution grid as well as very high resolution topographic data. But if we take so high resolution topographic data as well as grids, then again it becomes a problem to people who do not have very powerful computer, because higher the topography, higher the resolution, we need very powerful computers to use them. So somewhere now we have to compromise depending upon our resources. So the second factor that limits the model topography is, of course, resolution of the terrain data itself. Like suppose if you are using a 1 kilometer resolution model, but the terrain data is at 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 1 minute, then obviously the 1 kilometer topographic data is of no use, because model resolution is coarse, right? So let us see this model versus the actual terrain, how it looks like. For example, in this diagram, on the right side, you can see the actual topography. The right side, you can see actual topography. Okay, a photograph from the top, and the left side is the model topography. And you can see that there is very high topography here actually, but in the model it is highly smooth there. And similarly, the second peak also here. Also the coastline. Now this is the coastline, but you can see that sometimes the land intrudes in the water, and sometimes water intrudes in the land. So these are the problems of the model, numerical model, and NWB models. Okay. And this is the example of how the forecast looks like depending upon the topographic data in the model. For instance, this is the real topography on the left side, and this is the model topography. You can see all these reality, the peaks, the valleys, the slopes, how it is totally smooth in the model topography. See? Also, you can see the flow pattern. This is the real flow pattern. There is a circulation, the lee wave sort of things on this side, and there are clouds over there on the windward side, and there are also precipitation. But if you look at the simulated wind and the precipitation, then you can see that this feature is completely missed out on the leeward side. Also, the clouds are spread all over, unlike in this one, which is only on the windward side. Precipitation is also smooth and spread. So these are the real challenges of the modeling the weather over the mountains. Okay, this is another example. For instance, the simulation of precipitation. Okay, now this is a real precipitation distribution. There are two maxima. You can see that here there is one maxima and there is another maxima. Now the same precipitation distribution is simulated by model using two different resolutions. One is, let's say, 29 kilometer eta vertical coordinate quantitative precipitation forecast, and second one is 10 kilometer eta quantitative precipitation forecast. And you can see that these two maxima in the precipitation is how highly smoothed when the resolution is coarser, right? Whereas in the final resolution at 10 kilometer, very nicely the maxima is produced. So again, it shows that depending upon the resolution of the model that we use and also the topography, accordingly the simulation of the weather features, patterns, precipitation, etc. also changes. Now that was the horizontal resolution. What about the vertical resolution? Okay, vertical resolution is also very important. And as I said, I will be talking some of the fundamentals. So now this will be good for the students, but for seniors, maybe they can ignore these fundamentals, or maybe it will be a refreshment for the seniors. Okay. So as you know, in the model, generally starting from the Cartesian coordinate, that is the jet vertical coordinate, or the pressure vertical coordinate is used. But the point is that how many layers are needed to depict the entire atmosphere, right? And as you know, that we also impose the boundary conditions, right, at the bottom of the model and also at the top of the model. And because at the boundary, top as well as bottom, we assume that there cannot be vertical transport of the mass, okay, beneath the ground and also above the top of the model. So this is how the model is set up in the NWP, okay. But the question is that how many layers are needed to depict the atmosphere and what kind of coordinate system should we use? Okay. Now, the optimal layer placement depends upon the phenomena of interest. For example, if we want to resolve boundary layer properly, then we have to have very good resolution in the boundary layer, which can capture diurnal variation. Right? If we want to represent short waves, jet streams, cyclones, tropical waves, etc., then we have to have good resolution in the free troposphere, tropospheric atmosphere. And similarly, for long range forecasting, data assimilation, we have to have good resolution also in the stratosphere and above. Okay, now this is another vertical coordinate which most of you know, I know, familiar with, only for the students, that because in the jet coordinate system, there is a problem of representing the pressure gradient force, computing the pressure gradient force, the strip topography, right? So, and also in the pressure coordinate system, because the pressure itself is a variable, it will change with the time. So we cannot choose a coordinate system which itself is variable, right? Although it is very easy to compute the pressure gradient force on the pressure coordinate system, right? So, in 1959, Norman Phillips devised a technique called sigma coordinate, and the sigma coordinate is defined as, in the simplest way, as ratio of the P over Ps, where Ps is the surface pressure. And also it is generalized as P minus Pt divided by Ps minus Pt, whereas Ps is the surface pressure, Pt is the pressure at the top of the atmosphere. So in the sigma coordinate system, the biggest advantage is that it conforms to naturally sloping terrain. And sigma is equal to 1 at the surface and sigma is equal to 0 at the model top. But there are problems in computing the PGF at steep terrains also in this coordinate system. Okay, then the next is the steep mountain coordinate system. Although the eta coordinate was devised to represent mountains properly, but then there are still difficulties in this coordinate for representing the details of the PBL structure about the elevated mountains. Then another one is the theta coordinate system. Generally, as we know, theta is the potential temperature, and the free atmosphere is generally predominantly isentropic. That means potential temperature is constant, conserved, right? So advantage of this system is that it allows for more vertical resolution in the vicinity of the baroclinic regions. It also conserves important dynamic quantities such as potential vorticity. But disadvantage is that it crosses or intersects the ground. You can see in this diagram, for example, the eta layers, the coordinate is crossing or intersecting the ground. So again, this is not very suitable for the mountains. So therefore, nowadays in most of the models, people use the so-called hybrid vertical coordinate system, in which case the upper part of the model is represented by theta or sometimes sigma, and the lower part is represented by sigma, and upper part is represented either by theta or by pressure. Okay, so these are the vertical coordinates which are used to represent the topography properly in the model. Okay, so now we shall talk about the challenges in the observations. Okay, especially the observations which are required to resolve a system and also to represent a proper systems over the mountains. Now this is a recent event of Nepal of the Melamchi flood, which wreaked havoc in Nepal due to incessant rainfall. More than 50 people were missing. It just happened a day for yesterday on 15th of June. The lower figure, you can see that now this is the Melamchi River, and this area is the so-called, I think, Sindhu Palchok area, right? So the flood is devastating the entire region because of the continuous rainfall. Now the question is that whether the numerical models could predict so much of rainfall accurately or not, and if so, how much was the rainfall? In the upper portion, you can see that we have the rainfall from the observation of the ARG AWS network of Nepal, and the amount of rainfall is shown in these circles. Okay, so the point is whether this much of observation is adequate, or second question is that whether all these observations which are collected are really used in the model. There are the big questions. I've taken actually these 2 slides from the Facebook of Dr. Indra Kadel. Okay, and she writes that the government should expand AWS and ARG network and communicate the information through different mediums like SMS, etc. Also, the technology should be developed for landslide forecast on weather using the weather forecast for effective disaster management. So this very important point. I mean, first of all, we have to have good network of observation, and secondly, once we are able to make the forecast, then it should be communicated effectively, efficiently to the people or to the administrators. Now, the main question which I raised was that how much observation is required to be able to simulate such kind of event. Okay, this is also another. I think that was the event of Nepal, but also in recent, in fact, in last month, 4 cloudburst glacier bursts occurred in Uttarakhand, India, in 2021 till now. The first one was 7th February 2021, in which a part of the Nanda Devi glacier broke off at Joshimath near Badrinath Shrine, leading to a massive flood in the Dhauli Ganga River. Second was on the 4th of May, which occurred in Tehri, Uttarkasi and Rudraprayag district. Third one was on 11th of May, which occurred in Devprayag town of Tehri Garhwal district. And the fourth one very recently occurred in Dehradun, Chakrata region of the Dehradun. Okay, so I mean, these are the kind of events which keep occurring every year during this time, during the pre-monsoon as well as the monsoon season. And so many lives are lost. Okay, so how much observations are required really to accurately predict a physical phenomena? Okay, now that depends upon the spatial and temporal scale of the phenomena. Okay, what kind of phenomena we are trying to represent? Okay, and what is the spatial scale for that? For example, if we are trying to resolve a large-scale synoptic system, then of course we don't need very dense network of observation. But if you are going to resolve very high resolution systems like a small scale system like squall line or thunderstorms or cloudbursts, then definitely we have to have very dense amount of observations. Okay, the success in modeling and prediction depends on 2 major challenges. Okay, one is the initialization. We know that the NWP, the numerical weather prediction, is supposed to be an initial value problem. Okay, so the initial data is very, very important, and it must represent, the initial data must represent the correct structure at time 0 via data assimilation, which is far from solved problem, and it should be able to represent the embedded large scale sounding like Cape, Sierra, etc. Okay, the initial observations must be able to represent that in the model. Second important factor is that even with the perfect initial conditions, the physics parameterizations, especially the microphysics, are not and cannot be perfect within the bulk parameterization framework. I mean, as you can imagine, for example, I mean, no matter how much observations we have, how finer resolutions we go, of course, we can't go very fine resolution if we are trying to do the operational numerical prediction, because there is a limitation of the resources. But even if we go by very fine resolutions like say 10 kilometer resolution or 1 kilometer resolution, even at 1 kilometer resolution, still there are many processes which are not resolved properly. For example, the microphysical processes, the cloud microphysical processes, that are not resolved properly. No, so that will remain always a problem. Okay. Now, most of you know, and this is a very familiar diagram to all of you. Now we have got a system of satellites covering the entire Earth. Okay, all kinds of satellites, geostationary satellites, and polar orbiting satellites, which continuously gives us the data around the clock, all over the globe. Okay, so data coverage is there, but is this data sufficient everywhere? And then second thing is the radar coverage. Okay, the Doppler radar, and especially for the severe weather, the thunderstorms, the cloud burst, the Doppler radars are very, very important. Okay, these are the network of Doppler radar over India. Currently, about 27 Doppler radars are there. Okay, but still they are not sufficient. And there is a plan in India that in the course of time, they will have about 55 Doppler radars covering the entire country, umbrella of Doppler radars. Okay, but still there are very less radars in the mountains. Under one of the programs, I shall discuss shortly about the mountain Himalayan meteorology program. Now more Doppler radars are getting installed over this mountain region, like our J&K, Jammu and Kashmir region, Himachal Pradesh, and the Uttarakhand. Okay, recently 2 radars were installed there, one at Kufri in Himachal Pradesh, another one at Mukteshwar in Uttarakhand area. Okay. Similarly, in Nepal also, one radar is already installed at Surkhet in the western part of Nepal. Another 2 are under pipeline plan. One is at the Palpa in the central Nepal, and other one in the eastern Nepal at Ramaitar in Udaipur. Okay, definitely these 3 radars will be very, very useful for forecasting the severe weather. Okay, also because the Hindu Kush Himalayan region covers entire area from Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Nepal, to Bhutan, as well as Bangladesh, some portion of the Bangladesh. So the radars in this vicinity are also very, very important. In Pakistan, for example, we have got radars at Islamabad, Lahore, Karachi, Peshawar, Quetta, Gilgit, and in Bangladesh also there are many radars like Dhaka, Cox's Bazar, Khepupara, Maulvi Bazar, Rangpur. So there are many radars which are existing already, and still there are many which are in the pipeline to come. The question is that how to integrate all this data from the radar and utilize it operationally in the model, assimilate it operationally in the model, how to make a composite diagram. Okay, because the images of the radars are very important although, but then those images are not just for looking at and analyzing the kind of existing system. Unless we utilize the data from those radars and assimilate in the model, there will be not a good usage of those radar data for prediction purpose. So we have to have the data assimilation for radar. Okay. Now these are the existing IMT network in Western Himalayas, the existing network of surface observatories, the RSRW observatories, the pilot balloons, radars, etc. I can see. I mean that's of course. I mean of course this network is what 5 to 6 years ago. In recent years, many more stations have been added in this region. Now, at the time, there were about 15 AWS in this region, J&K 23 in Himachal, 20 in Uttarakhand, and so on. And similarly, the ARGs were quite a lot, but still, I mean, it was not sufficient at the time. Okay, and more are getting installed in the recent times. Then this is the network of observation in Nepal. Okay, you can see that it looks a good network, good dense network. But I mean, when we come to the reality for predicting the severe weather at very high resolution, then again those networks are not sufficient. And these are the distributions of different types of metro stations. For example, aeronautical. Now all these diamonds are aeronautical stations installed at airports in Nepal. Okay, the synoptic observations, those squares are synoptic observatories. There are 9. Agrometeorological observations are about 21. Okay, climatological stations are 76, and precipitation stations are 169. Okay, but for the model, what we need is the basic parameters of the atmosphere. Okay, that means the AWS data or surface meteorological data, and of course the upper air data RSRW. So how many RSRW are there? How many surface data are there really? So these are the kind of questions which we need to think and also improve. This is the Eastern Himalayas, okay, the northeastern state of India. Now all these 7 states like Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Meghalaya, Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, and they are the distribution of observatories. Surface observatory denoted by the red dots, RSRW by the blue dots, and the pilot balloon by the yellow dots. records. Similarly, these are the existing AWS network. Of course, in the recent time, many more have come up. This is, again, as I said, it is 5-6 years old network. Existing GPS station only one. Okay, so there are data available, the stations are available, but still they are not sufficient for a good mountain weather forecast. Okay, so how much observations do we assimilate routinely in the models, particularly about the Himalayas? After having said that, all that, we have got observations from the satellite coming every day. So many radars are already there in the area. Okay, so many AWS, pilot balloon, etc. But all those data, are they really entering the model? Are they really used in the model on a daily basis for forecasting? This is a big question, and we have to probe that. Okay, we have to probe that. I'm not sure how many observations per day are simulated in the model. No, but we can count it, and it should be counted so that we should know that how many observations are really utilized for forecasting. Okay. But one thing is that only those observations, whether it is surface or upper air, for example, SINOP, temp, sheep, pilot, etc., which are put on the GTS are normally assimilated. And as most of you may be knowing that now, not all the observations are really put on the GTS from all the countries. Only limited observatories are kept on the GTS, rest are not. Okay, so those which are kept on the GTS, they are assimilated, used every day for the forecasting, and those which are not, they are obviously not assimilated. Some satellite observations are directly downloaded from the FTP server of the satellite data providing agencies and assimilated in the model. So let us see a broad statistics, for example, per day in a global sense, not over the Himalayas in particular, which should be counted, but in a global sense, how many data are really received every day and also assimilated every day. How many data is rejected because of the quality control, because of the bad quality data, right? So typically, this is a statistics from MC, WF, and I just picked up this statistics for 15th of June, that is the day for yesterday. Okay, and all these are the different types of data. For example, surface data, sonde, aircraft, satellite winds, scatterometer wind, GPS, radio occultation data, the GOES, radius data, the ATOPS. I have to move up and down this bar. ATOPS, the IASI, the AIRS, HIRS, and all kind of satellite data. Okay, so as you can see, on a daily basis, typically we receive about 54,727 survey data, including SINOP, mobile data, AWS, buoy, over the ocean, etc. Okay, about the upper air sonde stations, including land and ship, radio sounds, pilot balloon, drop sounds, wind profilers, we receive typically about 3,762. I mean, this is the statistics of day for yesterday. Okay, aircraft data. How many aircraft data are received around the world? AirRip, AMDAR, about 97,532 per day. Per day, not only per day, it is just one time at 00 UTC. And it's like that, we have 4 times a day. The simulation cycle is 4 times a day. So at one time, 00 UTC, these many data is received. Similarly, the satellite wind. Okay, scatterometer wind from the ASCAT satellite, 60,000. Okay, 6,06,705. GPS data, the radio occultation data from Cosmic and GRASS, got 2,81,617. GOES radiance, these many data, ATOPS. Okay, IASI. IASI is, most of you must be knowing that. What are the full forms of these things? Okay, HIRS from the Aqua satellite. So these are the data. So the question is that these many data are received every day from the different resources, different platforms all over the world. Of course, out of which how much data is really received over the Himalayas, that needs to be calculated, that needs to be found out. Okay, and even these many data, out of these many data, how many pass through the quality control? Because before we assimilate the data in the model, it has to pass through the quality control. Unless we have a good quality data, we cannot have a good initial condition. So instead of improving the initial condition, bad quality data can deteriorate the initial condition. So we have to have a good initial condition, right? So I have some old statistics to just give you an idea. I don't have recent statistics, but I have old statistics to give you an idea that normally how many percentage of the data is simulated. This is all the statistics in which it shows that, again, the right portion of this slide is somehow covered, but approximately, I mean, these are the data received, these are the different parameters, these are the data estimated, approximately 27 point, I don't know how to move this. Oh, I can move, yeah, good. So as you can see that about 87% of the surface data is simulated in the model, rest 13% is rejected. Okay, 71% of the wind data is simulated and rest are rejected. 79% of the temperature, 30% of the water vapor, okay, 29% of the radiance data is assimilated, but rest are rejected. I mean, this is the reality, I mean, day-to-day fact. So how to improve the data quality, how to make the data quality control is also a big challenge, okay. So how do we do the control, quality control? We have to make a list of how much data is rejected, because every data is so important. As you know, I mean, lakhs and crores of rupees are spent by different governments to collect data. So every data is so important, and we don't really like to reject the data because of its bad quality. Okay, and how do we do that? There is a set of procedures like we check. Now, every day, every data is passed through this quality control check, like cross error checks, okay, neighborhood checks, temporal checks, manual corrections, etc., etc. All these things are done, and which are very, very important for data assimilation. Okay. Then there is a complex quality control procedure based upon very complex statistical techniques. Now, and in this technique, actually, the thing is that it not only detects the error, but it also tries to correct the data in the error in the data. Okay. The purpose is not to reject the data as far as possible, which differ from the background, which is the last previous 6-hour forecast. Okay. Also, the man-machine mix, because always the machine may not be right, so we have to always look into it manually also. As it is done at most of the numerical weather prediction center like ECMWF or NCEP. Okay. Then we have to have a hydrostatic check. That means the data which are received every day, around the clock, whether they are really maintaining some of the known constraints or some of the known conservation laws of the atmosphere, like hydrostatic law. Okay, whether it's maintaining or not, whether it is also observing the lapse rate, balance check or not. So all these things have to be done. The baseline check, the horizontal and vertical statistical check, etc. So these are the complex quality control procedures which are to be done for before the assimilation. Okay, so these are about the data quality control and challenges in observations. Now, with this view, of course, the government of India had started an integrated Himalayan meteorology program about 5 to 6 years ago. Okay, so the question is that what is the need for such project? Of course, everybody knows, understand the need for that. But just for continuity, this project was started to improve and upgrade mountain weather and climate services of the Himalayan region by establishing optimal state-of-the-art surface and upper air observatories, improving the understanding and prediction of weather and climate processes in complex terrain, development of appropriate system for 24/7 monitoring and early warning of extreme weather, to improve upon the spatial and temporal density of navigation weather observation network, particularly in the mountainous terrain, focused toward providing safe and effective meteorological services for helicopter operations, and to improve understanding of physical processes leading to the heavy rainfall, heavy snowfall, and cloud burst, etc. in mountain region, and to build appropriate services. Okay. Well, again, to move up and down this bar. And of course, to develop improved climatology for the region to cater the requirements of the users. Okay. So under this plan, many types of observatories were supposed to be set up over the entire Himalayan region from west to east. Some of them have already been installed by this time. Like there was a plan for commissioning 230 surface observing equipments, 9 Doppler radars, 3 in each of these states, like 3 in the Jammu and Kashmir, 3 in Himachal Pradesh, and 3 in Uttarakhand. Also in the east, in Sikkim. and so on. These are the proposals, network observatory network proposed for the Himalayan integrated Himalayan project. So now the third part of my talk is about the challenges in modeling and prediction. Okay. Now in the last 30 years, there have been major achievements in numerical weather prediction. Okay. One is that now our resolution of the model has gone very, very high compared to what we were about 30 years ago. Right? Nowadays, we are able to run a global model at 10-kilometer resolution. So that is one of the biggest achievements nowadays. Second is the data assimilation technique. It has also improved quite a lot in the last 2 to 3 decades. Third is the ensemble forecasting. Okay. Fourth is the availability of the computing power, high performance computing system. Okay. So I'll just quickly flash through these slides because I see that I'm taking time. I have to finish quickly. So this is just an example of simulation of cloudburst over the mountain. Just one case I'll just try to quickly demonstrate to you. Well, this is the slide which is based on the study of Debris et al. 2017, and this shows the statistics of the cloudburst from 1970 to 2015. About 30 events which were reported in this region, Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, and Uttarakhand. But what you can see from this slide is that the maximum number of cloudbursts were reported over the Uttarakhand region. Okay. And this is a very famous case of the Uttarakhand cloudburst that occurred during 16 to 17 June 2013, the so-called Kedarnath cloudburst. This is the Kedarnath shrine which got devastated after the cloudburst. Now this is the bridge, Lakshman Jhula in Rishikesh. You can see how high the river is flowing. In one day, about 340 millimeters of rainfall occurred, which was 375% of the daily normal rainfall. During that cloudburst, more than 5,748 people were killed, and 4,200 villages were either affected or damaged. So that was the devastation caused by that cloudburst in 2013. Now let's see quickly.
Professor Das,
yeah.
Sorry for the interruption. Because of the because you were out for a while, so I think we should add 5 more minutes to you.
Oh,
so
great,
I can see that you are in the middle of your whole presentation, but still I'd like to request you to wrap up in 5 minutes if possible. Thank you.
I have to wrap up in 5 minutes, or you give me 5 more minutes?
Yeah, in 5 more minutes means it was up to yeah. So maybe you can complete by 6:52.
Okay.
So it's 6:47 now.
Okay,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Thank you.
I'll try to quickly. So what I'm trying to show in this diagram is the example of simulation of the cloudburst event of Uttarakhand that occurred in 2013. And these are the forecasts by the global model. Actually, interestingly, even the global model, INSEAD model, had a good signature of the cloudburst. And this is the 4 days in advance rainfall distribution. This is the 5 days in advance, 6 days in advance, and 7 days in advance. And there was a good signature, at least 5 days in advance, the model could produce a good signature of the cloudburst. Okay, why I'm getting this admit request continuously? Okay, so how well were these forecasts? Were we able to see the indications of heavy rainfall at medium range lead times, 1 to 10 days? Okay, now as you can see from this figure that this is the time scale day, and this is the lead time. Okay, so on this is 13th of June, 14th of June, 15th of June. I mean, this is the time when the cloudburst occurred, and you can see that the model was able to fairly well simulate about 5 days in advance, a very high amount of rainfall. Okay. So I'll quickly skip these things. The point is that the model should be able to at least forecast 2 standard deviations. I mean, rainfall exceeding 2 standard deviations. That means the anomaly of the rainfall properly. Okay. And I'll just skip these things quickly. Okay, the other thing is, I would like to talk quickly is about the Severe Weather Forecast Demonstration Project, SWFDP. Okay, and this is a project of the WMO, which was initiated to strengthen capacity in national meteorological and hydrological services in developing countries to develop deliver improved forecast and warnings severe weather to save lives and livelihood of the property. And accordingly, NCMRW, of course, was interested in this task also. So for that, the income global model of the NCMRW, which was in 10, 20, and 70 levels in the vertical was used. Also, the ensemble forecasting system was used. In fact, even now also it is used regularly to deliver the forecast. So the forecast products are from the deterministic model and also from the ensemble model for the probabilistic occurrences of the severe weather. Okay. And these are some of the examples of the forecast. Okay, this is for the lightning forecast, 3-hourly lightning forecast, flash rates, and this is lightning threats. Okay, produced by the model every 3-hourly, and it produces like isolated lightning or moderate lightning or severe lightning. Then quickly, I would like to show about the simulation of the unique tornado of Nepal. Of course, many of you have seen already this result earlier also. Some of you have done a lot of work in this. The tornado case which occurred in 31st March 2019. And I know that all these DHM and the Small Earth Nepal, as well as some of the NGOs, they together surveyed the affected area and collected a lot of data after the event. So based upon, in fact, the report which they have produced, I just quickly like to flash this diagram. This is the satellite picture from the Sentinel-2 satellite, which shows the devastation here after the event, and this is before the event. And you can see that this tornado, approximately traveled about 90 kilometers, and it has a width of about 200 meters or so. Okay, so it is very difficult to really forecast such kind of event. Okay, by the model. The survey showed that its genesis was at 10 UTC of 31st March near Chitwan area in Nepal, and it culminated in Bara district on 13 to 14 UTC. Okay. Also, you can see from this diagram, there is another system which is forming over the Bangladesh. Okay, and this is the tornado. This is the cloud mass which actually led to the formation of the tornado. Okay, so quickly I'll flash these slides now. This is from the INSAT 3DR image. The same thing you can see from a broader view, and you can see the two systems, one about Nepal and another about the Bangladesh region. Okay. Then this system we tried to simulate using triple nested WRF model. One at, the outermost at 18 kilometers, then middle one at 6 kilometers, and innermost one at 2 kilometers resolution. Okay, and there are some of the results, and you can see that the model was really not able to reproduce this tornado well, and there are many reasons for that. I'm going to skip these things. Some of the important parameters which are used for forecasting the tornado are like SRES, that is the storm relative environment helicity, the bulk Richardson numbers here. Okay, and the CAPE, of course. So this is the diagram in which all three are simultaneously superimposed to indicate where are the regions where CAPE is more than 1200 joules per kilogram, the SREH, which is more than 300 meters square per second square, and the Richardson numbers here, which is more than 150 meters square per second square. Okay, so you can see that this is the area where the tornado occurred, but actually at that place the model could not reproduce or produce a good result of the CAPE, SREH, and the Brunt-Richardson numbers here. Whereas there are other case of Bangladesh, of course, it is showing a good amount of those values. Okay, so the inferences from that simulation was that the model was unable to simulate the tornadic storm over Nepal. Okay. The possible causes were that initial conditions for the model was not conducive due to lack of surface and upper air data at high resolution over the mountains, the lack of Doppler radar observations, and it emphasizes the need for convective scale rapid cycle data simulation. Okay. So, as most of you from Nepal must be aware that ECMWF, EC mode has developed a system for high impact weather services over the HKH region. Okay, and that they call as HiWatt. Okay, the high impact weather assessment toolkit, which is a service that provides probability based thunderstorm hazards forecast guidance to NHMS. Okay, I'll quickly skip these things. Well, I'm just because I'm running out of time, so I'll just skip these things quickly. I'll just show the example of the forecast which they produce on a routine basis. One is the probability of the intense storms, or other is the probability of damaging wind. Third is the probability of rotating storms. Okay, intense rainfall, damaging hail, and frequent lightning. These are the things which they produce every day. Okay, and these are the things which they provide also, like chances of intense storm, chances of damaging winds, chances of frequent lightning, chances of hail, etc. Okay, so there was some example. Also, fog is another important high impact weather, which I'm not going to discuss in detail because of the lack of time, so I'm going to just skip. But what is important for the fog is that we must be able to forecast by the model the three crucial parameters. One is the time of onset of the fog, other is the intensity of the fog, and third is the duration of the fog, and of course the dissipation time. Okay, is a very challenging thing because from the current models, it's really not possible to get a very accurate forecast of these things. But keeping in view of these challenges, the Ministry of Earth Sciences in India conducted a winter fog experiment for 3 years consecutively during December, January of 2015, 2016, and 2017. Okay, and collected a lot of data over the Indira Gandhi International Airport in Delhi. Okay, but we need to conduct similar kind of field experiments also at other places. Okay, some of the recently conducted FDP for the NWP and nowcasting are, for example, the Commonwealth Game 2010. One FDP was conducted to forecast the weather over all the stadiums, inside Delhi. Okay, then Beijing 2008, of course, similar things was done. Sydney 2000 also similar things were done. Okay, FDP storm, which is conducted annually by IMD. Earlier it was SARC storm. FDP Vortex for the tropical storm, tropical cyclones. FDP fog, I already mentioned. So in such kind of experiments, we collect special observations. Okay, for utilizing in the model and also to understanding the physical processes. Okay, one of them was SARC storm. Of course, most of you are aware of this. We'll skip this. So, having said that, I think we should also, there is a need of having a field experiment called Himalayan Meteorology Experiment, HIMEX, in which we should try to collect specific data, very high density data of a specific phenomena over the mountains. For example, now as we have seen, I have mentioned earlier that there is a lot of cloud burst in the last 30 years reported over Uttarakhand region. So we may have a specific observation test made over the Uttarakhand region, in which we can have a outer area array in which we can have
Professor Das,
large scale observations. And
I think we have exited.
Okay, I'm going to quickly now.
Yeah. So can you just quickly wrap up your presentation?
Okay, so fine. So I'm going to skip all these challenges ahead about the mesoscale and cloud scale forecasting, also about the rapid scale data simulations. Like what we do is nowadays, generally in the operational center, 6-hourly simulation, but for such kind of severe weather forecasting, we have to have more frequent simulation of the data, like 3-hourly or even 1-hourly for the convective storms. Okay, a simulation of Doppler radar data is very important. A simulation of lightning data is also equally important. I'm not going to talk about these things in detail because there is no time. So I'm going to skip all these things and jump on to my final slide because there is no time. These are all the impacts of the simulation of the lightning data and the radar data. Okay, the accuracy of that. Okay, and of course, nowadays every smartphone has got a sensor for surface pressure. Now, it will be wonderful if all the surface pressure observed by the smartphone can be collected and assimilated with the model. Forecast will really improve quite a lot by that. So, future the dream system of convective scale and Nupi over the mountain. We hope that in near future we'll have 4-dimensional ensemble Kalman filter hybrid data assimilation system every 5 minutes at 1 kilometer resolution. At approximately 1 kilometer ensemble forecast launch every 10 minutes up to about 6 hours. Reduced 2 to 4 kilometer resolution ensemble forecast up to 72 hours. Deterministic forecast from ensemble mean analysis up to 250 meter resolution and at reduced resolution beyond 6 hours. I mean, they are all the dream list, wish list, which is not so easy in the recent time because of the, it requires a lot of resources. Okay. Explicit forecast from MCS down to the tornado vortex scale with probability estimates. Okay. Well, I've finished. This is just to show you the first supercomputer Cray XMP 14, which was procured by NCM-RWF way back in 1989. And now, as on today, we've got a 2 petaflop system at NCM-RWF and 4 petaflop system at IITM. So together, more than 6 petaflop computing power is available in India. Thank you so much. Floor is open to you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Das, for your very comprehensive presentation, and especially covering a wide range of severe weather prediction over the mountainous region. And I'm sorry for pressing you to conclude your presentation rapidly. Definitely, we still have 3 more speakers, and now I need to limit their time as well, because I'd like to open the discussion and have more interaction if possible. So we have already received several numbers of questions and comments in our chat box, and definitely few of the participants would like to speak if they want to raise their hand. Meanwhile, there are few comments as well. We can discuss that later, but let me take first question from Dr. Soma Datta. So the question is it good to set 2 to 1 kilometer resolution in a mesoscale model to make a rainfall forecast over the Himalayan region?
Is it good to use 1 or 2 kilometer resolution? Is that the question?
Yes, in a mesoscale model. So I think you can also see the questions in the chat box if you can view them.
Okay, well, the point is that certainly, we expect that when we increase the resolution, the forecast of the quantitative rainfall also improves. The point is that if we increase down to 1 kilometer or 2 kilometer, see, now the model topography is available, at 10 meter resolution. But the question is that whether we have the observation also, because unless we have the observations at that resolutions, now the model will simply reproduce the first case. So in order to have a good forecast for that resolution, we have to have also a compatible observations for that scale. Okay, this is my answer.
Okay, thank you, Professor Das. So the second question I'm taking is from Amrit Thapa from Ishimor. So he's asking about the information, especially number of automatic weather stations that can measure the snow variables over India, and he is wondering whether India Meteorological Department has a high resolution, high altitude research data on snow and glacier. So he would like to know the importance, or your thoughts on extreme events for glacier health mass balance. So his major, I think, concern is relating with distribution of or network of automatic weather station for modeling or understanding the snow and glacier over the Himalayas.
Well, I showed you in one of my slides about the existing network of observatories over the Himalayan region, especially over the Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, and Jammu and Kashmir region. In one of the slides, if you want to see once again, I can reproduce it. But I can tell you that yes, I mean there are automatic rain gauge stations, slow gauge stations over the mountains, and there is a plan to enhance those observatories further under the integrated Himalayan meteorology program. Okay, this is the quick answer I can give you.
Thank you, Professor Das. So I'm going to take another question from Musai. So he's asking, why are humidity and radiance data rejected in that scale? 70% are rejected. how important is satellite in data assimilation?
Well, satellite data assimilation is very, very important. Actually, this is a very good question. Our experience has shown that if we receive every day so many data, millions and millions of data every day, and from all kinds of platforms. So, I mean, we ourselves, as well as also at other global numerical weather prediction system centers like ECM, WFI, and SEP, people have tried to study what is the impact of each type of data. Like, what is the impact of satellite data alone? What is the impact of radar data alone? What is the impact of aircraft data, surface data, upper air data, and so on? And it is established that the maximum positive impact of the data on the quality of the forecast is made by the satellite observation. Satellite are the backbone nowadays. Now, satellite data provides the maximum improvement, maximum impact on the forecast. Okay, and in fact, it is because of the satellite that nowadays we have got good data coverage also in the southern hemisphere. Earlier, the data coverage was very poor in southern hemisphere, but because of the satellite, we have got good data coverage. And I could show you the statistics. I do not have the slides right away to show you the impact of each of those kind of data on the forecast.
I think Sumesh sir, I think you should stop your sharing slides. So
Okay,
that
okay.
So that we can see.
I can see also the person who is asking the question.
Yes.
He is showing his video.
So, yeah, I can also see, the question by Sanjeev Newpan in the chat box, as well as he has raised hand. So I would like to allow him to, speak and ask the question directly to Professor Das.
Your mic is mute. Dr. Sanjeev Newpan, your mic is mute.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. It's me, Sanjeev Newpane, from Bangkok. I'm currently a PhD candidate in Water Engineering and Management program in Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand. And I'd like to thank Professor Das for very nice and comprehensive presentation, and it was really great to learn from you, sir. Sir, I'm very new to this weather forecasting model, and I have few queries. So, like, can't we rely on the results from like global climate models and regional climate models for disaster mitigation in the Himalayan region? And also another is, like, for the setting of the weather forecasting model, how reliable is the satellite data, like TRMM, Aphrodite, etc.? Thank you, sir.
Well, I mean, whether you are asking about the global climate model or global weather prediction model, that see differences between the global climate model and the.
Yes. So, like, can we rely on like some results from global climate models for the disaster mitigation in Himalayan region?
Well, actually, there are projects for the intercomparison of the model products. Okay, in which many centers, the global numerical weather prediction centers, participate, and they run the model for very, very long time, and then they make the outputs available to the people to investigate themselves whether the model is really performing good in their area or not. Okay, so certainly, I mean, nowadays the model outputs have improved substantially compared to what it used to be 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Definitely, yes, especially for the large scale synoptic systems. Okay, but for the small scale synoptic situations like thunderstorms, cloud burst, still there are a lot of challenges and difficulties. Regarding the satellite data which you mentioned, yeah, I mean, as I said, satellite data is one of the backbones for the NWP nowadays. But still, I mean, not all the satellite data which is received every day, millions and millions of data is received every day from the satellite, but not all of them are assimilated. One reason is because that, see, we can assimilate the data only if our model is also having the same resolution as compatible to the observations, right? Suppose if you have every data at every 1 kilometer, for example, if you have data at every 1 kilometer, but our model is at 20 kilometer resolution. So what is the use of 1 kilometer data when the model resolution itself is 20 kilometers? Similarly, now the radar data, for example, the radar scan is made every 10 minutes. All the IMD, India departments, radars are scan 10 minutes, the whole sky is scanning in 10 minutes. But if the assimilation is done 6 hourly, then what is the use of having such a high density data? And we have to just throw away many data. So unless we are able to assimilate the data very frequently and also have very fine resolution, we really cannot make use of all the good data in the model. And so therefore many of them are dropped out. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Professor.
Okay.
Thank you. So I have a question from Nabasu Chattopadhyay. So the question is that the network of observation in plain land is comparatively better than hilly areas. Does satellite information, especially at high resolution, may be the best option in predicting severe weather in hilly areas along with other information? But the high resolution satellite data in different terrain of hills have a considerable noise. Then what should be the scientific policies in future under such circumstances to predict the severe weather with high precision in hilly region and save the lives and properties in the hilly region?
Well, Dr. Navansu, it's a good question, challenging question, and probably you know the answer for that. The thing is, see, the satellite data are certainly available from all kinds of satellites, right? And all kinds of satellite data. Like the geostationary satellites data is available, but that is, the altitude, 36,000 kilometer altitude, right? And so we have got the polar orbiting satellite data at a much lower altitude, right? Which can do a good sampling of the system. But the problem with the polar orbiting satellite is that it passes just 2 to 3 times a day or 3 to 4 times a day over the given region, right? So these are the challenges. And of course, the data quality is also, the data quality is not the same everywhere. Like the quality of data over the ocean is not the same as that over the mountains, right? So it depends on the surface type of surface quality data. So satellite data alone definitely cannot solve all the problems, but we have to use all kinds of observation, local in situ observations at the surface. Now, the radar observations as much as possible, plus the satellite observations and upper air balloons, wind profilers, and everything, right? So one type of data alone is not really sufficient. We have to have a mixture of all.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Das. So one more question from Halatun. How about the mesoscale model to predict extreme weather in mountainous region?
How
about the mesoscale model to predict extreme weather in mountainous region?
Well, we are using it already. We are using, in Nepal also it is being used. I think DHM is running a model every day. The model is run at DHM every day. And so also, as I said, the EC mode also is running the HiWatt system every day. So we are using mesoscale model every day, but still there are challenges. And I try to explain what are those challenges. Right? Mm-hmm. And the point is that I do not know. Certainly I know that at DHM the assimilation is not done. But HiWatt, I'm not sure whether they do the assimilation. And if they do, then at what resolution they do. Now, how much data, the local data is entered in the model, whether just the large scale synoptic data is utilized or also the local data is assimilated. Those are the questions which have to be addressed. Okay, and that only the operating system and center can answer that, right? But yes, certainly we can use the mesoscale models. What mesoscale models? Even the cloud scale models at 1 or 2 kilometer things also can be used. And people have used that. Okay, even we have used that at 1 kilometer.
I think we are running out of time. Okay. But still, there are many questions in the chat box, and as suggested by Professor Aryal, maybe we can, send those questions directly to Professor Das, and maybe he can reply by email. So I'm going to take one more question from Dr. Mohan Kumar Das. So he's asking, what are the major reasons of not capturing the mountain and steep terrain weather extreme by the numerical models? So that's the question.
Mountain weather.
Yeah.
And
Dr. Das. Major reasons for not capturing mountain and steep terrain by numerical models. I think you presented about that, the
Well,
challenges.
I could get the essence of his question. I mean, of course, Dr. Mohan already knows that answer. One of the main reason is, again, as I said earlier, that the tornado, for example, the tornado that hit Nepal on 31st of March 2019. I mean, we tried so many numerical experiments, okay, but merely running the model is not enough unless we also have a compatible observations fed into the model, okay, for a simulation, and also proper resolution. So unless we have that, we cannot really predict the such kind of systems so accurately. Of course, Bangladesh is prone to tornadoes. Many more number of tornadoes occur in Bangladesh every year almost. At least one or two occurs in Bangladesh. Okay, so and then there are 6 Doppler radars also in Bangladesh. So although again, I don't know whether they are all operated on a daily basis or only when there is a severe system, cyclone, etc. Only then that those radars are operated. So we have to have a continuous operation of all these kind of radars to be able to monitor all the severe weather and not miss out anything, to be able to simulate all observations at more frequent cycles, like at least 1 hour, if not 3 hours, if not 6, if not 1 hour, at least 3 hours, we have to do the simulation. So they are the things, challenges for forecasting the weather over the mountains. But on a broad scale, yes, I mean, broad scale features are definitely represented. It's not that they are failing all the time. They are represented, but if we go very precisely that at what time, at what place, and at what intensity, then there are challenges for that. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Das. I think we need to stop here now. I thank all the participants for providing comments. I'm not including all of them, but definitely I can see Dr. Mandira Shrestha from EC Mode talking about recent Melanchi flood, which is you presented about that, and the recent development with that. She has mentioned how the flood has occurred, and that has been also shared by Department of Hydrology and Meteorology in its notice today morning. And there are also some comments from Anuj, Bhargava, and many more. I thank all of them, and definitely Professor Das as well. So we need to move ahead, and we are already several minutes behind the schedule. So now I'd like to request Dr. Samarendra Karmakar from Bangladesh to provide his comments, limiting to, if possible, to the 4 minutes.
Only 4 minutes for me.
Yes, I'm sorry for that.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm very much, feel proud to be here in this webinar, and especially Dr. Das's presentation on the challenges. The mountaineers severe weather situation is very difficult, really difficult. But he explained from the fundamentals of coordinate system, eta and theta and eta or sigma coordinates, everything in the model. But model, without a model, practically it is very difficult to forecast or predict the mountaineers. And you see, during the last few years, it is my observation that I have seen a lot of western disturbances are moving over the Himalayan region, and there are so many westerly and easterly flows combined together over the foot of the Himalayas or over the Himalayas region or Nepal, something like that. Especially, he already mentioned about the tornado, severe thunderstorms activities on 31st March of 2019, and he showed the Himawari satellite pictures also. If you look at that picture, you can see that there are a lot of conjugation of so many flows. One over Nepal, westerly, one westerly coming through the foot of the Himalayas, and another coming from the Northwest Indian, and another coming from the Madhya Pradesh, through the Madhya Pradesh, and another coming from the Odisha coast. So this flows, especially westerly and easterly, I think there are 3 types of conjugations, and that forms a very large, thunderstorms over the mountain regions and causing a tornado intensity, severe weather there. And on that day, I think our country was also, very much affected that day. And it is very difficult to predict these systems. And you see, we see always that in the mountain regions or sub-Himalayan West Bengal or Bihar, there are so many conjugations of westerly and easterly, and in the daytime, a bright cloud mass is formed, and that descends southward to West Bengal and Bangladesh, and it creates havoc through the thunderstorm activities with lightning and hails, everything, and heavy rain also. And every year, I think in our country during the pre-monsoon season, a lot of people are killed due to the severe thunderstorm, and multiple cells are also formed, especially the example of 31st March. There are a lot of bright cells were there, and one large mass was over the Nepal, which caused a tornadic activities there. And this day also, Nepal, India, Bangladesh were very much badly affected with gusty winds, hails, lightning, and heavy rain too. I talked about these thunderstorms only, but there are other severe weather events like cloud burst, floods, heavy rain, and cold surge also. But mainly the thunderstorms, these have very, I think, grievous bearings on the people and also the properties of the, people. So it is therefore imperative to forecast the severe weather events using satellite, radar, and weather models, models to save lives and properties of the region. The forecasting of severe weather is really a challenging matter, especially in the particular region of Himalayas where the terrain is irregular, very much difficult to model this Himalayan region. And in this presentation, Dr. Das has discussed how to present the Himalayas in the numerical models, challenges in collecting the observations about the mountains, their quality, and also the convective scale data assimilation, ensemble forecasting challenges, everything he already discussed nicely. But in my opinion, I think in the models there must be assimilation of local data. Also, he told about it, local data, assimilation of DWR data, and also satellite data. And we should increase also the local surface observatories so that this data can be assimilated in the model to get a very good prediction of the severe weather. I must thank the organizers, especially CDHM, Tama, and ASEAN, Small Earth Nepal, for organizing this nice webinar. And this is very much important in predicting the severe weather over the Himalayan regions. But in our country, maybe it is easier because it is very plain, and Dr. Das has nicely presented the models and the model details. I must thank you and thank the organizers for giving me a chance to comment on this. Thank you very much. Thank you. How much time I have taken? More than 4 minutes?
Thank you, Dr. Karmakar. Thank you very much for being brief. Now, I'd like to request Dr. Madan Lal Shrestha to provide his comments. And as I requested to Dr. Karmakar, I would also like to request Dr. Shrestha to limit his presentation for 4 minutes, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dheeraj. I think first of all, thank you for having me in this program, and I would really like to thank the organizing committee of this CDS webinar. I think Dr. Das, I think I know him very well for a long, long time now. I think I'm very happy to see, him talking about this severe weather and how it can be taken up by this numerical way by modeling. I think he has rightly talked about the importance of the resolutions in the the spatial and temporal, also in the horizontal and the vertical direction. But I think it is challenging in the Himalayan region. It is a very challenging task. First, to incorporate the topography, and next is to run the the model itself. So I think in that one, he has taken up very nicely with a lot of examples. I think about because I was just wondering about there are a lot of observations taken by the member countries of WMO, but unfortunately, if we look at the different meteorological organizations, most of them are not, all of them are not received. So even though the WMO, in our region, the WMO is doing the monitoring, but still, I think there is some discrepancies in that one. But for that one, I would like to remind, like the model is very good in taking up the synoptic scale system. Suppose the cyclone like Hudhud, which has devastated the western part of Nepal in 2014 during the mid-October. But I think though the model can take up or forecast these systems, but within that big system, there are mesoscale systems, which is very, very difficult and which needs definitely a very high resolution data itself. And when we talk about the data, I think, the station data will be never adequate in the Himalayan region. So because of this paucity of data, and this is because of I think that it is because of the complex terrain and the hostile environment, and also the very, I think, the resource incentive to set up these data at higher altitudes. So these are some of the constraints. So I think in that way, as I think Professor Das has also mentioned about the satellite and the radar, I think that is the direction that I think we should go really to get the high resolution data. But it depends on what kind of a resolution that we get from that one. So I think that was very important. And for us, within the mesoscale system, as we have seen, the cases like in, the 31st March tornado that Nepal has experienced, and which I think would not be, captured by the model. So I think for that one, we really need very high resolution data. And I thought that, Dr. Das has very well illustrated about the radar systems that we have in our region, in the Himalayan region, like starting from Pakistan, India, then I think there are one radar already established in Nepal, and another 2 is on the way. So I think then I think Bangladesh. So with these radar network, I think whether we can do some kind of a collaborative effort, to mix, to collect all these data and assimilate or incorporate into the model. I think in that way, I think we should be able to capture some of these high impact mesoscale disturbances. So I thought that I think it was very, very illustrative and a very, very motivating talk from Dr. Das. And I would like to really see, with the SAMA and other organizations, I think we should be able to look at how we can collaborate to, as you know, to collect or to exchange these data from radar and satellite and other sources within our region, so that I think each member state can develop and exchange their ideas so that we can predict these high impact weather in the future. So I think with that, I think I would like to thank Dr. Das for his very nicely presented talk. And I would also like to again thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Madanlal Shrestha, for your comment and remark. Definitely, I agree with both Drs. Karmakar and Shrestha that we have a challenge, to especially utilize all the information and data that are useful, but how to make them, usable to the community or society or the users. The Small Earth Nepal, at the Small Earth Nepal, we are also working at, accepting this challenge and making all the information data, whether it is from a regional level or national level, to make them usable to the community. And as Dr. Shrestha said, now Professor Das is also a convener at SAMA. Maybe there should be more, responsibilities to him to work on that. So without taking any more time, because we are already 10 minutes late as per our schedule, I'd like to request Professor Ajit Tyagi to provide his remarks. And again, I'm requesting him to limit his presentation for 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dheeraj, and on behalf of South Asian Meteorological Association, thanks organizers for giving us this opportunity to co-host this important webinar. And I'm happy that Professor Someshwar Das has comprehensively covered the topic on a top subject which is so important both for as a science, operationally, but for the meteorological services and the society as a whole. The severe thunderstorms and severe weather in the Himalayas concerns each one of us, and there are challenges. But if I look back the day when I started forecasting early 70s, the Himalayas used to be pre-satellite era. There used to be virtually no observations, but for some surface observations. So we have made a significant progress in all aspects, as Professor Das has brought out. Modeling, computing powers we have got now, where we can run mesoscale model at high resolutions. Data has increased, definitely. We have got variety of satellites. The radars are coming up in all our member countries. So it's very heartening to see that we are on the right path to address this challenging task. See, Himalaya is so complex, and once we are able to forecast here, I think we have done the last thing in the mesoscale forecasting. World over, this is a challenge to forecast in the complex topography, and there cannot be a more challenging than the Himalayas. So I am happy that for us, this provides a challenging task, and our scientists, the universities and the researchers should now take up this challenge more earnestly, because now we have got tools to do research, to apply it, and for the forecasting services to use those forecasts to provide guidance for the safety of society. So my request will be there, both organizers, which are, one is academic institution, very promising, Department of Hydrology and Meteorology in Nepal. Then we have got a small Earth Network, Nepal, and of course SAMA, that we should see how we collaborate and address this issue. Encourage younger researchers to take up this challenging task and enable them to by providing data and computing power under various projects in collaborative mode. Let me tell you, this is not a simple problem. Each region will have a unique, you see, though we may call it a uniform modeling platform, but the local peculiarities needs to be addressed. So the Western Himalayas, Central Himalayas, Eastern Himalayas, Bangladesh will have different challenges to be addressed. But I'm sure we'll be able to take up. We are at the right now stage to lead to the next level. And this is, I'm really happy that the organizers have chosen this topic. And Professor Das has comprehensively addressed it, must have created interest among the young researchers, and will take it forward. Sama will like to do a follow-up, I think, some tutorial on this. If Professor Das agrees with the interested students, and we can address to specific aspects of modeling of the mesoscale. So thank you once again on behalf of Sama and myself. It was wonderful. I felt home in the company of my senior colleagues and the colleagues, Shrestha Sahab and Karmakar Sahab, along with me. And so is the hosts here, Professor Deepak and Dheeraj. So thank you so much. I learned a lot. I enjoyed participating in it. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this important event. Let it not be one of the events. We should take off from here, come out with some concrete steps forward of collaborative work in this region. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tyagi, for your remarks, and definitely, we should continue our collaboration in future as well, as you suggested, and blessings from all of you. Before requesting Professor Aryal to close this session, I would like to thank all the organizers, CDHM, SAMA, and the Small Art Nepal for providing this opportunity to me, moderating this very, very important and fruitful webinar. And I definitely agree that this is at a very right time that we are hosting this webinar. Onset of monsoon is there, floods are there, and I agree with some of the comments provided in our chat box as well. So as suggested by Professor Aryal, we'll be compiling these questions and requesting Professor Das to respond to them, so that with all those answers, we'll be sending them to all the participants. So now finally, we are at the end of our webinar, and I request Professor Aryal to close the webinar with his closing remarks, as well as announcing for the CDHM webinar series 13 that will happen in August. So thank you all, and I take leave here and request Professor Aryal to present.
Okay, Dheeraj, thank you very much. You did well. Thank you once again. And this is my concluding remarks as a chair of this session. So first of all, I would like to thank you, Dr. Someshwar Das, for his nice presentations. So we are starting from 65 meters to 8,800 meters. We are elevated in such a way, and just after the onset of monsoon, our situation is like this. This is just 2 days before Sindhupalchok. You also mentioned in your presentation. So this is very important to know about because there are a lot of change in data science from 20 years, and now we have observed data as well as so many model as well as satellite data. So we can give some kind of forecast for the people of this region. Your presentation is extremely important for the students, researchers, meteorologists, as well as forecasters, and also for the planners. So I would like to once again thank you, Professor Das, for being with us. And I'm very, very happy to be with Professor Ajit Tyagi as a chief guest. And this is our great honor that we have 3 Director General, former Director General of Bangladesh, Nepal, and India, Dr. Samarendra Karmakar from Bangladesh, and Dr. Madan Lal Shrestha from DHM Nepal. And recently we have observed that we receive five days rainfall is amount. The amount of 5 days rainfall is about 1 year's rain in Western Nepal. It has to be proved, but I found just recently in some online magazine. So we should have to find some, we should have to investigate some result. What was happening? What was there from this? After this webinar, we will go to the site. We will go look for the data. We will look for the literature. So once again, thanking everybody on board in this webinar, as well as the organizing committee, Dr. Dheeraj, Vinod, Nami, Sunil, and maybe I forget to mention everybody's name. Once again, I would like to thank you. And I'm going to announce the next CDHM webinar 13 by Dr. Sonu Khanal. He is a hydrologist working in Future Water, the Netherlands. And he's talking about climate change impact on hydrological regimes in high mountain Asia. He's going to talk at the end of July or beginning of August. With this, I would like to once again thanking you and good night.